Why meat is the best, worst thing in the world. Not only is this video incredibly misleading in regards to its information, it's super popular. So I feel like I have to address a few things in this video, from actual statistics being misrepresented in regards to greenhouse gas emissions, actual harm done when harvesting certain crops, and maybe we'll agree on a few points here and there in regards to factory farming, and just get you guys to understand this video, because I've had so many people ask me about this already in the span of a couple hours. Just to give you guys an idea of impact of climate change, before we watch this video, eating a plant-based diet is less than switching to an electric car. It's like the equivalent of half of going car-free. If you washed your clothes in cold water, if you recycled and you hung dry your clothes, you would be doing more than a vegan would. And if you're a vegan that has a child, that's roughly the equivalent of 30 people going vegan. Having one less child is at 60, whereas going vegan is below 2. So for people, this is a pretty relative and gets people to actually understand what the implications of going plant-based are, because most of the times the benefits are drastically overstated.
Humans love meat. Steak, fried chicken, bacon, pork belly and sausages are just the best things. Eating meat has become so trivial that many people don't consider something a proper meal if there's no animal involved. Which is pretty amazing, since only a few decades ago, meat was a luxury product. Today, you can get a cheeseburger for $1. Paradoxically, meat is pretty much the
All right, saying you can get a cheeseburger for $1 and then saying that meat is a luxury item years ago depends on what context. There were indigenous Eskimos eating completely meat diets 100 years ago. So that's a bit misleading, saying meat was a luxury item. And saying the price point is a cheeseburger for $1, come on.
most inefficient way of feeding humans. If we look at it on a global scale, our meaty diet is literally eating up the planet.
The assumption that you can sustain yourself off of foods you would feed animals is very misleading. There's one thing to look at the physical caloric amount of a food versus what nutrients it has, how it digests in the body, and whether or not it can actually sustain human life, let alone in an optimal way.
Why is that? And what can we do about it without giving up steak? Humans keep a lot of animals for food. Currently, about 23 billion chickens, 1.5 billion cattle, and roughly 1 billion pigs and sheep. That's a lot of mouths to feed, so we've transformed Earth into a giant feeding ground. 83% of its farmland is used for livestock, for example as pasture, and to farm fodder crops like corn and soy.
I'm assuming they just lumped all corn and soy production into the 83% of available farmland being used, which is literally one of the most misleading things you could do, because we all very know how many products, soy, corn, and all of those fodder crops, alfalfa, that are used between the monocropping. It's just incredibly misleading.
That's 26% of Earth's total land area. If we include the water we need for these plants, meat and dairy production accounts for 27% of global fresh water consumption. Unfortunately, meat production is like a black hole for resources. Since animals are living things, most of their food is used to keep them alive while they grow their tasty parts.
The problem is with a lot of these statistics, they lump everything into one percentage. They say meat and dairy consumption, you might be thinking beef and dairy, but that includes all animals. Sometimes they even include fish in these percentages for water use. Just keep that in mind.
Only a fraction of the nutrients from fodder crops end up in the meat we buy in the end. Cows, for example, convert only about 4% of the proteins and 3% of the calories of the plants we feed to them into beef. More than 97% of the calories are lost to us.
And then again, they're implying that those calories can actually be utilized by humans. I mean, maybe you should feed them grass,
To create 1 kilogram of steak, a cow needs to eat up to 25 kilos of grain and uses up to 15,000 liters of water.
And guys, a lot of the things I'm going over here, they're going to kind of tie into the factory farming thing and how we should be supporting local agriculture in the end. So just keep in mind, this is all in the context of factory farming systems.
Animal products are guzzling up tons of food, but they only make up 18% of the calories humans eat. According to projections, we could nourish an additional 3.5 billion people if we just ate the stuff we feed to animals. To make our favorite food
Yeah, and those 3.5 billion people will be even unhealthier than they are now.
group even more unsustainable, about 15% of all greenhouse gas emissions caused by humans are created by the meat industry, as much as by all ships, planes, trucks and cars combined.
15% of greenhouse gas emissions being created by the meat industry. Meat production is 15% of emissions. Agriculture in general is 9%. You look at the EPA website, you could do the percentages yourself. All agriculture equals 9%. You know, I don't know where these people are pulling these numbers from. I really don't. They really are misinterpreting the data. And not only that, I mean, there's just so many other things that go into climate change, from, you know, how many companies underreport, the pollution. There's just so many things that people worry about, that blaming meat for climate change is the silliest thing you could ever do. It really is. I think one thing, just interesting thing worth mentioning, is dinosaur era had 5 times today's CO2. So, you know, although we might be artificially changing the climate through, you know, modern things, you know, what are the actual implications of that is what we have to look at. You know, I think it's just something interesting to bring up.
And there's another aspect to meat. It comes from actual living beings. Pigs, cattle and chicken are not the ones writing the history books, but if they were, humans would appear as rampant genocidal maniacs that thrive on suffering. Globally,
Humans are rampant genocidal maniacs that thrive on suffering? How can you say something like that? If, like, the crazy thing is, these people literally think that killing an animal to sustain yourself and give yourself nutrition and respecting nature and doing that in a proper way, you know, it's so misleading. It's just, I can't stand it. I really can't.
we kill about 200 million animals every day.
I mean, are you talking about insects? Or are you talking about fish? Because, you know, these statistics, every single thing they say in this video is, why do you have to misinterpret the data? You could probably use the actual numbers and still get the same amount of views and actually not mislead people.
About 74 billion a year. This means that every 1.5 years, we kill more animals than people have lived in the entire 200,000-year history of humanity. One could argue that we're doing them a favor. After all, they wouldn't exist without us. We might eat them in the end, but we also provide food and shelter and the gift of existence to them. Unfortunately, we're not very nice gods. A lot of our meat comes from factory farms, huge industrial systems that house thousands of animals. Engineered to be as efficient as possible, they have little regard for things like quality of life. Most pigs are raised in gigantic windowless sheds and never get to see the sun. Sows are kept in pens too small to turn around, where they give birth to one litter of piglets after another until it's their turn to be turned into bacon. Dairy cows are forced to breed continually to ensure their milk supply, but are separated from their calves hours after birth. To fatten up beef cattle for slaughter, they're put in feedlots, confined pens where they can't roam, and put on weight more quickly. To make it possible to keep them so tightly together without dying of diseases, the majority of antibiotics we use are for livestock, up to 80% in the US, which helps in the short term, but also fuels antibiotic resistances. But the ones that may have got the worst deal are chickens. In factory,
This is why a lot of people that are familiar with zero-carb carnivore, you could eat a lot of raw meat, raw fish, raw wild-caught fish just fine, but the different strains of bacteria caused by these antibiotics are what actually ends up being harmful to us, not just the bacteria itself.
farms, they're kept in such vast numbers and so close to each other that they can't form the social structures they have in nature, so they start attacking each other. To stop that, we cut their beaks and claws. Male chickens are deemed worthless since they can't lay eggs and are not suitable for meat production, so within minutes after birth, they're usually gassed and shredded in grinders. Several 100 million baby chickens are killed this way each year. Even if you had a personal score to settle with chickens, how we treat them is beyond broken. So, better buy organic meat, where animals are treated nicely, right? Organic farming regulations are designed to grant animals a minimum of comfort. The problem is that organic is an elastic term. According to EU regulations, an organic hen still might share 1 square metre of space with 5 others. That's a long way off from happy farmyard chickens. Farms that sincerely do their best do exist, of course, but meat is still a business. An organic label is a way to charge more money, and countless scandals have revealed producers looking for ways to cheat the system. And while organic meat might be less cruel, it needs even more resources than conventional meat production. So buying organic is still preferable.
Using pasture and natural ecosystem farming, yes, there have been cases in other countries of them literally removing forests to grow livestock, but the point is to have the livestock on pasture land and grasslands in a natural ecosystem. So say that producing grass-fed beef, do you see people complaining about deer in the woods eating grass? Like, how crazy is that people would literally say that cows eating grass require more resources than what we do now?
But does not grant you moral absolution. The truth is, if so...
And just to touch on that, the net CO2 emission is positive. Grass-fed cattle have stop supporting factory farming. And I've kind of preached this in, off topic in many of my videos. It's on my list of videos I have to make in the future, but people want to pay $1 a pound for pork loin. People want to pay $2 a pound for chicken breast. People don't want to pay $8, $9, $10, $15 a pound for grass-fed beef. People want cheap meat. You can't have it both ways. That's just how it is. If you want to go to the supermarket and buy grain-fed ribeye on sale for $5 a pound, then this is what's going to happen. If you want to spend more money, which people don't, that's just how it is. People don't have enough resources. They don't want to spend their money. They don't want to support local agriculture. I support grass-fed beef every time. I support pastured eggs. I spend way too much money on food. I support that. 99% of people don't, probably even more than that. This goes to like homesteading, how a lot of us used to, more people used to live on farms and rural areas, raise their own food. This is a big aspect of making a sustainable ecosystem and having high quality, nutritious food that does not damage the environment. If you want to put it large scale, make it super affordable and not invest a lot of time, because, a farm is literally a full-time job, and humans are used to, throughout all aspects of evolution and all phases of our lives, up until recently, spend all of our time procuring resources for food. Now, we procure money to buy other things outside of food, and we don't really care about food when it's literally the most important thing in our lives. But if you guys think that avoiding meat is less cruel, there are more this says a diet of plants causes the fewest animals to be killed. Leaving chickens and eggs out of our diets will have the greatest effect on reducing the suffering and death caused by what we eat. That is not true. 1 million calories is 1 cow. And 1 cow on pasture in a natural ecosystem, you're killing 1 animal. Growing grains, fruits, vegetables for a year for 1 million calories, or whatever, how many calories you need to sustain for a year, that's 2 to 3 times more animals suffering than just a cow. And a lot of these statistics are based off of just, morals, and that's, even that gets very cloudy, where you start talking about mollusks and various animals that don't have nervous systems, and how you need to use fertilizer for plant foods. There's just so many contradictory things, and I didn't really want to turn this video into kind of an anti-vegan argument. I just wanted to touch on the points and how they're misleading people, and how the things they say aren't true at all. And we didn't even touch on the nutrients and how fat-soluble vitamins are necessary in the context of an ideal human diet. They just they try to angle it with, oh yeah, of course we're wasting calories, meat is ruining the environment. But when we look at environment statistics, they alter the statistics. Agriculture is 9%, and there's obviously clear ways that impact the environment way more than going vegan or removing meat from your diet. It's ridiculous. If they literally said, "Oh, ride your bike to work," that's the equivalent of 3 vegans. What would you guys be saying? Like it just discredits them to no end. So I don't really want to. I think I've hammered this point home fairly well. I don't think there was anything else I wanted to touch on. If you guys are looking for, a good place to source food, Eat Wild is an okay website. But go to local farmers markets, go to local supermarkets, speak to the butcher, see if they get you grass-fed stuff. Try to just support higher quality agriculture, and things will get better. But if you guys keep going in to buy those $1 a dozen eggs, I spend $5, $6, $7 a dozen on eggs for pastured eggs at my local, farmers markets, various Amish farmers in Pennsylvania. That's it, guys. That's the solution. Support local, sustainable, or just better agriculture than what we're doing now.